Imagine being dropped into a mathematically infinite universe,
Hmm.
right? Like a world where you are completely guaranteed to be the first and only human to ever see your immediate surroundings.
Yeah, it's a wild thought.
Right. And what is the very first thing you do? For most people, the instinct is just immediate and visceral. You build a wall,
You build a wall to block it all out.
you
Exactly.
gather materials, you enclose a little space, and you attempt to, you know, tame a tiny fraction of that infinity. But today, we are doing a deep dive into the psychology of a player who totally refused to build a wall.
Which is fascinating. They just tried to outrun infinity instead.
Yes, exactly. Welcome to a new deep dive. We're looking at this amazing first-hand narrative journal of a highly specific Minecraft playthrough. It's a strategy known as nomad survival.
And, looking at the visual of this sprawling, blocky, unexplored topography map behind me, it really sets the tone.
Oh, totally.
Mhm.
Because this refusal to build a house, I suspect it isn't actually about the freedom of the open road, It's
Yeah.
about avoiding the vulnerability of attachment. The second you build a wall, you have something to lose. Okay, let's unpack this.
I mean, that is a profound way to frame it. When we transition from, a nomadic state to a settled state, we accumulate property. Right.
Right, which means we accumulate anxiety.
Precisely. A permanent structure anchors you to a specific coordinate. It forces you to defend that coordinate against creepers, zombies, whatever. By rejecting that basic human instinct to settle down, which is the standard approach for almost everyone, the player strips away their safety net.
But they also strip away the psychological burden of defense.
Yeah, they are deliberately choosing absolute unpredictability over controlled vulnerability.
Which sets up this unbelievable tension right from the moment they spawn. They drop into this untouched, procedurally generated Minecraft world, and in the upper left corner of their screen, they just have a map.
And it's completely blank, right, except for their starting position.
Totally blank. Now, we know these digital worlds are practically infinite. They generate endlessly in every direction as you walk. But what I find so fascinating is the immediate contradiction here.
Contradiction how?
Well, they're committed to this boundless nomadic existence, right? But the very first thing they do is look at this finite square piece of paper and become obsessed with filling it in.
Oh, yeah. The map completionist mindset.
Exactly. They don't just run wildly into the infinite void. They methodically walk the upper edge, then the right edge, strictly to fill the blank squares on the map.
It's so structured.
Right. So I have to push back on this concept of the infinite here. If the goal is endless wandering, why constrain yourself so rigidly to a two-dimensional grid right out of the gate? Is the world being truly infinite actually paralyzing?
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is that infinity is fundamentally paralyzing to the human cognitive apparatus. We cannot process boundlessness.
So the map is basically a psychological safety blanket.
That's exactly what it is. Without a framework, an infinite canvas doesn't feel like ultimate freedom. It feels like sensory and executive overload. So by fixating on the map, the player is using a tether.
They're artificially imposing boundaries on a limitless space to make it manageable.
Yes. In psychology, we look at Gestalt principles, right? Specifically, the law of closure. The human brain just craves visual and conceptual completion.
Like an unfinished puzzle driving you crazy.
Precisely. A blank spot on a map is essentially an open cognitive loop. It acts as an unanswered question that creates this low-level, persistent tension.
So completing the map is actually less about exploration and more about cognitive offloading. You're taking this terrifying, incomprehensible scale of a randomly generated universe and, reducing it to a checklist.
Yeah, exactly. If I walk this line, I've conquered this square.
It's an illusion of control. You can't conquer the infinite environment, but you can conquer the abstraction of the environment.
Right. And in doing so, they start this highly structured method of engaging with chaos. They're methodically transforming the unknown into the known. Not to settle it, just to catalog it.
But, as we see in the progression of this journey, that methodical map walking forces a massive collision with the harsh realities of survival. The geography itself dictates a total shift in priorities.
Because you can't just walk forever without eating or gathering resources.
Right, so the player's tracing the edges of this map, walking through these sprawling, welcoming forests and plains, and then they stumble into a stone biome.
The stone biome. Newer players usually hate those.
Exactly. We all know the early game aesthetic trap. You want to stay in the lush green areas. They feel hospitable. A jagged gray mountain of pure stone just feels barren and dead.
But this playthrough highlights a brilliant strategic contradiction.
It really does. The nomad strategy forces you to actively seek out the ugliest, most inhospitable biomes because you can't afford the luxury of building a permanent strip mine. You need resources practically falling out of the surface.
Yeah, it's a complete inversion of aesthetic bias. When you are untethered from a base, your entire heuristic for evaluating an environment shifts entirely.
It shifts from, is this a pretty place to live, to something else entirely.
Right, it shifts to what is the immediate material density of this location? The stone biome is an early game powerhouse because the raw materials of progression, specifically coal and iron, are just exposed right there on the cliff faces.
So the nomad looks at a harsh, gray cliff and doesn't see a wasteland. They see an exposed battery.
Exactly. They see armor, they see the structural foundation of their survival completely laid bare on the rocks. It's efficiency over beauty.
Which creates this intense utilitarian calculus for the player. They immediately abandon the methodical map tracing, right? They scramble up the rock face to pull iron directly out of the mountain.
Because iron is the ultimate difference between dying on night 2 and surviving.
Exactly. And this is where the environment presents a massive psychological test. Because mixed in with the iron and coal embedded in the stone are emeralds.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the text notes those only spawn in specific mountain or stone biomes.
Right. And they're incredibly rare. But there is a hard mechanical constraint here. If you try to mine an emerald with a primitive stone or wood tool, it shatters. It just vanishes.
Oh, that's brutal. So you have to have an iron pickaxe to extract it.
You do. And this is a masterclass in systemic enforcement of delayed gratification. It's like a mechanical marshmallow test.
That's a great analogy. It's a test of systemic understanding versus pure impulse.
You have this incredibly valuable treasure chest right in front of your face. Your brain is firing dopamine, screaming at you to take the reward. But if you swing the hammer you currently hold, you destroy the very thing you want.
So you have to physically turn your back on the emerald? You have to leave them sitting there?
Yeah, you have to prioritize gathering iron, smelting it, and forging the correct key, the iron pickaxe. It demands such a high level of executive function. You're just hoping you don't lose the location while you build the foundation required to claim it.
And that restraint is the hallmark of a player who understands that survival is not about hoarding. It's about sequencing. You just cannot leapfrog the technological progression.
If you let greed override the mechanics, the system permanently punishes you.
Exactly. By prioritizing the iron, the player shows they value the means of production over the luxury of the commodity.
But the environment doesn't just let you calmly sequence your tasks, does it? As the player is mapping out this mental checklist, gather iron, build furnace, forge pickaxe, get emeralds, the core variable of the game violently shifts.
The clock.
The sun starts going down. We are dealing with a relentless 10-minute real-time day cycle. That is an incredibly compressed window of safety.
It is a pressure cooker for decision-making.
Yeah.
10 real-world minutes of daylight means that every single action has an immediate opportunity cost. You cannot procrastinate for a second.
Because when the sun dips, the environment flips from passive to actively hostile.
Right. The skeletons, the zombies, the creepers all come out. They represent an immediate existential threat to someone who has deliberately chosen not to build a shelter.
Here's where it gets really interesting. A traditional player would be panicking, right? Realizing they forgot to build a house, lacking the wood, the doors, the walls.
Panic is the default response there, yes.
But the nomad executes this classic maneuver that is so beautifully simple. It almost feels like a cheat code against the concept of architecture. They pull out their pickaxe, dig a simple 2x1 hole directly into the side of the solid stone mountain, step inside, and place a block of stone back over the door.
In 3 seconds, they achieve total isolation.
Total isolation.
Yeah.
No wood, no planning. It's the ultimate expression of subtractive architecture. Instead of spending hours gathering materials to add a structure to the world, they subtract a minuscule volume from the world to create negative space.
They are weaponizing the existing geography. The mountain is already an impenetrable wall and an indestructible roof.
It's a digital hibernation state. But just imagine the claustrophobia of that transition for a second. For 9.5 minutes, you are running across infinite plains. The sky is massive.
And then, in a fraction of a second, you are sealed inside a pitch-black tomb in the rock.
Yes. It's a sensory deprivation tank built out of pure necessity. It's a total sensory reset.
And inside that confined space, the macro journey of exploration is completely paused. The microeconomy of survival takes over.
Right, because inside the hole, the player places down a crafting table and a furnace. They ignite the furnace to smelt that raw iron they frantically pulled from the cliffside.
And the text highlights how satisfying that flickering flame animation is, right?
Oh, deeply resonant. In the context of this infinite, openly hostile universe waiting just on the other side of a single stone block, that tiny, predictable light from the furnace provides an immense psychological anchor.
The world outside is absolute chaos. But inside this hole, the player is executing a perfectly controlled, productive sequence.
It really highlights our deep-seated need for confidence. When they enter the hole, they were effectively prey, hiding from a lethal world.
But as that iron smelts, they start progressing. The pickaxe for the emeralds, then a sword, a shield, full iron armor. They are undergoing a rapid evolution in there.
They are manufacturing their own agency, the transformation from being vulnerable with nothing to being fully encased in iron gear. It never gets old. It's a visible metric of mastery over the elements.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, once that mastery is achieved, the strict dogma of the nomad reasserts itself.
This is the moment that completely separates this playstyle from everyone else. A normal player would just leave the furnace and the crafting table on the wall. It's an outpost, right? A little breadcrumb of civilization you might use later.
But not the nomad. The nomad breaks them both down. They destroy their own means of production to put those blocks back into their inventory.
Which brings us to the profound economic trade-offs of the nomadic rule. Because they have no permanent base, every single block counts.
For a settled player, time is the most valuable resource. So leaving a massive castle or even a furnace behind is efficient. You don't have to build it again. But for the nomad, inventory space is the absolute premium.
Right, it's a battle between spatial efficiency and temporal efficiency. By carrying the furnace, they are accepting the temporal cost of having to place it and break it down every single night.
But in exchange, they get the spatial freedom of never being anchored to a specific coordinate. Their capability travels with them. It is an ultimate display of minimalism.
Attachment to infrastructure is viewed as a vulnerability. You literally carry the fire with you. And then they deploy the final tool in this internal phase, the bed.
Ah, the bed.
The source material calls the bed a time machine. It's the most underrated mechanic in the game. You place it down in this claustrophobic hole, and instantly the 10 minutes of lethal darkness and waiting are skipped.
It edits out the dead time. By utilizing the bed, the player is manipulating the game's cycle to ensure they only exist in the world when the variables are in their favor.
Skipping danger entirely. It's highly aggressive time management.
Exactly. So, morning arrives, the player breaks down the bed, leaving absolutely nothing behind, keeping that inventory lean, and they break the stone seal on their mountain hole.
They step out into the sunlight. They go retrieve those emeralds now that they have the iron pickaxe, but before they move on, they leave the hole empty.
It's just a secret story in the world no one will ever know about.
Yeah. In a procedurally generated universe that goes forever, that tiny carved-out space is a permanent digital scar. It's this intimate story of survival that absolutely no one else will ever see.
It served its precise utilitarian purpose, and the moment it outlived that, it was abandoned. And then they returned to the abstraction that drives them, the map.
Yes, the map. The edges are filled, the armor is on, the emeralds are secured. All that remains is the unexplored center of the map. And here the player quotes something amazing. The map is not the territory.
Meaning the map is just a representation, while the world is far more complex.
Exactly. The piece of paper is a flattened, sanitized reduction. It shows green for forest, gray for stone. It doesn't show the claustrophobia of the mountain hole or the heat of the furnace or the procedurally generated uniqueness of what's actually out there.
The map is a heuristic. It's a simplification to make navigation possible, but it strips away the vital details.
And the world aggressively proves that point. Because exploring the remaining middle of the map reveals something huge. They crest a hill and find a village.
Now, in this specific environment, a village generates completely randomly. The layout, the buildings, the specific villagers, and their trades, they are unique to the specific world and will never exist again.
It is a mathematical anomaly, a totally unique collision of algorithms. If this world is deleted, this exact village is gone forever. It's a spontaneous injection of civilization right in the middle of the wild.
So how does our philosophically grounded nomad react to finding this miraculous oasis?
They walk right past it. They ignore the village entirely to finish the map.
It's unbelievable. They look at this bastion of safety, look at their map, which still has a few blank pixels, and they rationalize it by saying, villages don't move.
They ignore the territory to prioritize the map. It is pure hubris. Walking past a safe haven in iron armor with a backpack of emeralds simply because the map wasn't done yet.
This is a textbook example of goal blindness. The map was initially a tool to help navigate infinity, but the completion of the map became the target itself.
So what does this all mean? The player became so hyper-focused on the abstract metric of filling a square that they deliberately ignored a serendipitous, highly valuable opportunity sitting right in front of them in the three-dimensional world.
They valued the completion of a two-dimensional drawing over the tangible safety of the actual environment. And then the ultimate equalizer of this universe rears its head again.
The sun starts going down. Day one is coming to a close. The map edges and middle are finally filled, but the 10-minute clock strikes again.
And look at the spatial reality they've engineered for themselves this time. They're out in the middle of somewhere with no logical place to put a bed down safely.
They're completely exposed,
Yeah.
caught out in the open entirely because of their obsession with a few blank pixels. There's no stone mountain nearby to carve a hole into.
The environment violently enforces humility. The player's artificial goal of map completion has actively sabotaged their fundamental goal of survival.
The irony is just punishing.
Yeah.
The player actively shunned civilization to be a solitary nomad, only to be forced to rely on the village's safety when the clock ran out. They have to retrace their steps back to the exact village they previously ignored.
Racing the fading light, they arrive just as the sunlight disappears.
It's humiliating. They have to sprint past the villagers to throw their bed down inside a pre-built house. End of day one.
It creates a perfectly symmetrical narrative arc for this first cycle. It begins with rejecting a settlement and ends with seeking refuge in one.
But on the player's own terms. Right. They didn't build the village. They aren't going to settle there or put up fences. They're just using it as a temporary utility, placing their bed to skip the night.
Right. It proves that while you can adopt a minimalist nomadic philosophy, you cannot entirely divorce yourself from the utility of the structures around you. The infinite world will occasionally demand you rely on something bigger than your own inventory.
And as the entry closes, looking ahead to tomorrow, the text notes, the middle of the map still has secrets. Caves and valleys dropping away into the unknown, promising more discoveries.
The surface represents the establishment of base mechanics, but the descent into the caves represents the transition to true exploration of the unknown.
It's just an incredible density of events for day one. From spawning with nothing but a map, surviving the 10-minute clock in a sealed mountain hole, gearing up with stone biome iron, to the hubris of ignoring a mathematically unique village, only to run back to it at nightfall.
It really is a phenomenal slice of interactive psychology.
It totally is. And it reminds us of the value of looking at familiar things, like a video game, through a new analytical lens. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a philosophical question drawn from this text.
To think about, yeah.
Think about that empty hole the player left behind at the side of the mountain. In this infinitely generated, completely unique digital world, the player created a tiny shelter, survived the night, and abandoned it. It's a permanent scar on the landscape, a story that absolutely no one else will ever see or know about.
It's completely invisible to everyone else.
Right. So in our own lives, how many invisible, temporary shelters or milestones do we leave behind that no one else will ever see?
That's a powerful thought.
A temporary mindset that got you through a crisis, or a quiet routine you developed during a hard year. Does the fact that no one sees them make them any less meaningful? Perhaps those invisible subtractive spaces we create just to get us through the dark are the most vital structures we'll ever build. Keep exploring your own unknowns. We'll see you on the next deep dive.